Hello friends, so here we are starting our revision series. We will try to cover important topics of all the subjects. First we are beginning with the environment, and in the environment we are starting with international conventions and organizations. So the first organization we are talking about, or the convention we are talking about, is Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, also known as Rio Summit, that happened in 1992. So it happened primarily because of the production of toxic components such as lead in gasoline, poisonous waste, radioactive chemicals. Secondly, alternative source of energy, cleaner source of energy. And third purpose was new reliance on public transportation system to reduce vehicular emission. So these three were the main issues, and the fourth issue was the growing scarcity of water, and because of that there was the formation of the Convention of Biological Diversity first, and then United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which we popularly call UNFCCC, were the two legally binding agreements reached upon during the Earth Summit. The point you have to remember here is that Convention on Biological Diversity and UNFCCC is a legally binding agreement. If in UPSC such statements can be formed. Agenda 21, which is also related to sustainable development, is a non-binding action plan of the United Nations. UPSC may make it binding. Binding is only Convention on Biological Diversity and UNFCCC. Number 21 signifies the agenda for the 21st century. 21st century, what we have to do, how we have to achieve sustainable development. Then there was another document which was finalized, that was Forest Principle. Forest Principle is a non-legally binding authoritative statement of principle. It is not legally binding, it is non-legally binding for global consensus on the management, conservation and sustainable development of all types of forest. It makes several recommendations for conservation and sustainable development forestry. So you have to remember this. Also you have to remember this, in Indian laws, forest has been not defined clearly in any of the forest acts that have been formed. Secondly, Honorable Supreme Court has given a judgment in which even if some area is not comes into the purview of forest, if we see legally, then also it can be seen as forest if it satisfies the dictionary meaning. जो dictionary meaning होता है of forest, if it satisfies that, then it will be under forest. So that you have to remember it. Okay. There are a couple more important points with regard to forest which I have written in the compilation. Do revise that. Okay. Now we will talk about UNFCCC. So, as I have said, in the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, it was adopted by consensus, and it was the first multilateral legal instrument on climate change. As a follow-up, the World Summit on Sustainable Development, Rio Plus 10. After 10 years of this, Rio Plus 10 was held in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa. In 2012, the United Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio Plus 20, was held in Rio and is commonly known as Rio Earth Summit of 2012. Such questions have been asked by UPSC in the previous years. What it provides? It provides a framework for negotiation of specific international treaties called as protocols. If you have to form protocols or treaties for the environment, it provides a framework to achieve the same, that aim to set binding limit on emission of greenhouse gases. As of March 2019, UNFCCC has 197 parties. Thus, it is a quite successful framework. Then comes the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD. It is an internationally legally binding convention which recognized for the first time the need for conservation of biological diversity for the welfare of humankind. The agreement covers all ecosystems, species as well as genetic resources. This can be a statement. It covers all ecosystems, species as well as genetic resources. So it covers genetic resources as well and species as well. Objectives of the convention include: first is conservation of biological diversity, as the name suggests. Second is sustainable use of its component, using the component but sustainably so that it does not hamper the future needs. Third is fair and equitable sharing of benefits. If some benefit is arising, then most of the time the indigenous section does not receive the equitable benefit of the same. To ensure that this convention will work. In the 10 meetings of the Conference of Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity held in 2010 in Nagoya, Aichi Prefecture, Japan, Aichi biodiversity targets were adopted. Aichi biodiversity target had adopted several goals which needed to be fulfilled from 2011 to 2020. The aim was Convention of Biological Diversity. Year 2020 was referred as Super Year for Biodiversity. Uh, India instituted together with the UNDP Biodiversity Governance Award at the COP Cartagena at the COP, which was organized in the Hyderabad. Okay. So you have to remember this, but it is less likely to be asked. The important thing is Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. So CBD covers the rapidly expanding field of biotechnology through its Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. As the name suggests, it is related to the biosafety norms. It addresses technology development and transfer, benefit sharing, and biosafety issues. So if there is a technology transfer or if there is a transfer, it should happen safely. To ensure this Cartagena Protocol was formed. The biosafety protocol seeks to protect biological diversity from the potential risk posed by living modified organisms. Living modified organisms are formed through various technologies of biotechnology, and LMOs should not hamper the environment. To ensure this protocol has been formed. There are two main sets of procedures under the protocol. One for LMOs intended for direct introduction into the environment, known as Advanced Informed Agreement Procedure. As the name suggests, you have to inform in a prior manner if you want to transfer LMOs. And another for LMO intended for direct use as food or feed or for processing. So FFP agreement is also part of this. So what does Advanced Informed Agreement says? Under AIA procedure, a country intending to export LMO for international release into the environment must notify in writing the party of import before the first processed export takes place. In writing, you have to give this. Okay. The LMO FFP says that parties that decide to approve and place such LMO on the market are required to make their decision and relevant information, including risk assessment reports, publicly available through the biosafety clearing houses. If there is some posed risk, you have to make it clear, you have to disclose it in written. Then there was a supplementary protocol which was added, which was known as Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on Liabilities and Redressal. It further strengthened the protocols which is related to liability and redressal if at all the danger which was posed actually happens, then how their liability will be ensured, how redressal will happen. To ensure this, Nagoya Protocol was formed. The supplementary protocol specifies response measures which must be taken in the case of damage to biodiversity resulting from living modified organisms. Nagoya Protocol is a 2010 supplementary agreement to the Convention on Biological Diversity. It is about access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing as it is being mentioned in the Cartagena Protocol. Then there is a body named International Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. In short, it is said as IPBES. It is an independent intergovernmental body. First, it is independent, not under any body. They may say that it is under UN. So it is independent, intergovernmental, established by the member states in 2012. The aim is to strengthen the science policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem services for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being and sustainable development. Another important convention is United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Established in the year 1994, it is sole legally binding international agreement. It is legally binding, which links environment and development to sustainable land management. As it says, if there is unsustainable land management, then it leads to desertification, and several million hectares of land every year desertified because of the unsustainable practices. So it is one of the Rio Convention that focuses on desertification, land degradation, and drought in regions like Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Caribbean region, mostly the developing world. It is a type of, what is desertification, they may ask you. It is a type of land degradation in which the biological productivity of land is lost due to natural processes. It may happen naturally also, or by induced human activities. If there is a natural process and there is a human practices which are unsustainable, then it may intensify the process itself, whereby fertile areas becomes increasingly arid. UNCCD launches land degradation neutrality to conserve, sustainably manage and restore land. This is another keyword that you have to remember, is land degradation neutrality, to ensure sustainable manage and conserving the land. If it at all it has been desertified, to restore the former as well. 14th COP of UNCCD was held in New Delhi, adopted the New Delhi Declaration. Several initiatives were launched, like International Coalition for Action on Sand and Dust Storms, Initiative of Sustainability, Stability and Security, Youth Caucus on Desertification and Land. Then comes the very important convention, that is Ramsar Convention. It is an intergovernmental treaty that provides framework for national action and international cooperation for the conservation through ecosystem approach and simultaneously sustainable use of wetlands and their resources. Sustainable use of, or wise use of wetland, is the keyword here. However, it is to be noted that under Ramsar Convention, there is no binding provision related to conservation of wetlands. This is the statement which can be formed. There is no binding provision related to conservation of wetlands. It was adopted in the Iranian city of Ramsar in 1971, but came into force in 1975. It is the only global environmental treaty dealing with a particular ecosystem. This is also one statement which can be found by the UPSC. Ramsar is, however, not affiliated with the United Nations system, another important point, but it works very closely with it. Parties to the Ramsar Convention commits to working towards the wise use of wetlands. Secondly, identifying suitable wetlands to be listed under wetlands of international importance, which are called as the Ramsar site. India has around 75 Ramsar sites. Ensuring international cooperation on transboundary wetlands, shared wetlands and shared species. Then there is a Montreux record. If a degradation or a change have happened in some wetlands that are likely to occur as a result of human interference, so such wetlands are included in Montreux record. Loktak Lake, which is situated in Manipur, and Koilado National Park, Rajasthan, which is situated near Bharatpur, are the two Montreux record sites in the India. Then Changwon Declaration on Human Wellbeing and Wetlands highlights positive action for ensuring human well-being and security in the nature. So if they will ask you Changwon Declaration, they will write one option and how it is related to what, then you have to write that it is related to wetlands. Then there is another important convention which is known as Vienna Convention. Vienna Convention was adopted in the year 1985. Sometimes they may tell you to arrange. So a kind of rough idea about the year should be also there. And entered into force in 1988. It acts as framework for international efforts to protect the ozone layer. However, it does not include legally binding goals for the use of chlorofluorocarbons. This is the important point. It does not include legally binding goals for the use of chlorofluorocarbons. The Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer and its Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer are dedicated to the protection of us ozone layer. The substances which are related to that have the potential to deplete ozone layer are included in the Montreal Protocol. MOEFCC established an ozone cell and steering committee on the Montreal Protocol to facilitate implementation of the Indian country program for phasing out ozone depleting substances production by 2010. This may be asked, but it is not much important. Then there was a Kigali agreement that happened, a kind of amendment happened to the Montreal Protocol. After there was nearly 2 decades, so it was desired that there should be some changes to counter the posing problems. So you have to remember that Kigali agreement is not related to Kyoto Protocol, but it is related to Montreal Protocol. This can be confusing. It is a legally binding agreement under which parties are expected to reduce the use and manufacture of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, not HCFCs. There is a difference. They may make HFCs, HCFCs. So you have to remember the Kigali Agreement is related to HFCs by roughly 80 to 85% from their respective baselines till 2045. HFCs, though a greenhouse gas, it is not dealt with under the Paris Agreement but under the Montreal Protocol. You have to remember that HFCs are not ozone depleting substance. This can be a statement. They are the greenhouse gas and they are not included in the Paris Convention. So it is being dealt in the Kigali Agreement. Kigali Agreement for HFC reduction is a legally binding on countries from 2019. However, developed and developing countries have different targets, as it is their common but differentiated responsibility story of every convention. Then comes the Minamata Convention. Minamata Convention is on mercury. M से M, अब याद को M से Minamata, M से mercury. On mercury is a global treaty to protect human health and the environment from the adverse effect of mercury and its compounds. It was agreed in the fifth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee in Geneva, Switzerland, and entered into force on August 2017. ठीक है? Controlling the anthropogenic release of mercury throughout its life cycle is one of the key obligations under the convention. Throughout the life cycle, okay, this is the key word. The convention also addresses the interim storage of mercury and its disposal once it becomes a waste. Sites contaminated with mercury as well as health issues. So once it is disposed, then also there are provisions to deal with it. Also the sites which are contaminated, there are provisions related to it as well. More than 140 countries including India have ratified the convention. Then comes the Rotterdam Convention. Rotterdam Convention was adopted in September 1998, came into force in 2004. The convention is jointly administered by UNEP and FAO. It creates legally binding obligation for the implementation of prior informed consent procedure. Rotterdam Convention is related to prior informed consent procedure. It is legally binding. Objectives of the convention are to promote shared responsibility and cooperative efforts among parties in the international trade of certain hazardous chemicals in order to protect human health and the environment from potential harm. So it is related to the trade of hazardous chemical. Second, to contribute to environmentally sound use of these hazardous chemicals by facilitating information exchange about their characteristics, by providing for a national decision-making processes on their import and export, and by disseminating these decisions to parties. Okay. So there should be a kind of communication. That is why the word is prior informed consent procedure. The convention covers pesticides, one. Second, industrial chemicals that have been banned or severely restricted for health or environmental reasons by parties, and which have been notified by parties for inclusion in Annex 3 for the purpose of prior informed consent procedure. If some chemical is included in Annex 3 of this protocol of this Rotterdam Convention, then it has to be ensured that there is a prior informed consent procedure which is followed while the trading of those hazardous chemicals. Rotterdam Convention, hazardous chemicals, okay, prior informed consent procedure. Okay, the previous convention was Minamata Convention related to mercury. Another important point is recently two chemicals, the pesticide Foret and the industrial chemical hexabromocyclododecan HBCD were added to Annex 3 of the convention, making them subject to PIC procedure through which countries can decide on future imports of these chemicals. Okay. The third convention is Basel Convention. The Basel Convention is on the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste. There was a popular saying, not in my backyard. So what was happening was that the developed world was trying to dispose waste in the developing countries. To ensure that this does not happen, Basel Convention was formed, which want to control the transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal. It was adopted in 1989 but came into force in 1992. Objective is to protect human health and the environment against the adverse effect of hazardous waste. Its scope of application covers a wide range of waste defined as hazardous waste based on their origin and or composition and their characteristics, as well as the two types of waste defined are other waste, household waste, and incinerator ash. Okay, it's not that important. The guiding principle of the convention are that transboundary movement of hazardous waste should be reduced to a minimum. First thing is reduced to a minimum. Minimized at the source itself, not moved to another country. Managed in an environmentally sound manner. Okay, fourth is treated and disposed of as close as possible to their source of generation, not moved to some other place. If a hazardous chemical or a hazardous waste is moved to some other place, it can create some hazard. So it should be disposed then and there. The regulatory system is the cornerstone of the Basel Convention, based on the concept of prior informed consent. Here also there is a prior informed consent, like Rotterdam Convention, which is specifically dealing with the hazardous chemical trade. Here it is dealing with the disposal of the hazardous waste. Okay. It requires that before an export may take place, the authorities of the state of export notify the authorities of the prospective state of import and transit, providing them with the detailed information on the intended movement. The proper disclosure is central in all these conventions. Then comes the Stockholm Convention, or initially it was related to dirty dozens, which is persistent organic pollutant. Such pollutant which biomagnify themselves when they reach from one trophic level to second to another. DDT it biomagnifies when it reaches till fish, and it can be detrimental to their health and the aquatic ecosystem and the general biodiversity. So it is a global treaty to protect human health and the environment from chemicals that remains intact in the environment for long period, because they stay in environment for long period. Their intensity increases, their concentration increases, so they have to be dealt cautiously. It calls for international action on three categories of persistent organic pollutants, that is pesticides, industrial chemicals, and unintentionally produced POPs. POPs under Annex A of the convention are to be eliminated. अगर Annex A में है तो it should be eliminated. If it is in Annex B, then it should be restricted. If it is in unintentionally produced POPs under Annex C of the convention, are to be restricted or eliminated. C deals with unintentionally produced, not intentionally produced. So it can be either restricted or eliminated. So you have to remember, Annex A में अगर कुछ है तो it will be eliminated. Annex B में कुछ है तो restricted. Annex C में कुछ है तो वो related है unintentionally produced, और इसको या eliminate कर सकता है और it can be restricted. The convention requires parties to prevent the development of new POPs and to promote best available techniques and best practices for replacing existing POPs. So substitute है तो try to find a substitute. The convention initially addressed 12 POPs, known as dirty dozen, but as of now it has reached to the level of 30. During the conference of parties to the Stockholm Convention 9, it was decided to list dicofol, which is used as miticide on a variety of field crops. It can be asked, dicofol is what? And perfluorocatonic acid, PFOA, used in the production of non-stick cookware. It salts and PFOA related compounds under Annex of the convention. It should be eliminated. They are used in the non-stick cookwares, PFOA. Okay. We will talk about some international organizations. Traffic. It is a wildlife trade monitoring network established in 1976 by WWF and IUCN. This is the important point here. Worldwide Fund for Nature and IUCN, not UNEP. Okay, not UNEP, not any other organization, not WMO. Traffic is being established by WWF and IUCN. It was established principally as a response to the entry into force during the previous year of the sites. Okay. It is a network, and as the name suggests, it deals with the having a kind of collaboration to reduce the trafficking, to reduce the illegal wildlife trade. So this has been formed, and it works in close collaboration with governments and sites. Then comes the International Tropical Timber Organization. It is an intergovernmental organization under the UN. International Tropical Timber Organization. You will think that it is not part of UN, but Tropical Timber Organization is part of UN. This is important. Promoting the conservation and sustainable management, use and trade of tropical forest resources. Its members represent about 80% of the world tropical forest and 90% of the global tropical timber trade. So this fact can be cited, and you will feel that this is wrong, but this is right. United Nations Forum on Forest was established by the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. This can be asked that who had formed the United Nations Forum on Forest. It was formed by ECOSOC. Okay. And it deals with the, as the name suggests, management, conservation, sustainable development of all types of forest. Okay. It was established in year 1997. The forum has universal membership and comprises all member states of the UN. Okay, IUCN, one of the very important body, founded in 1948 as the International Union for the Protection of Nature. The organization changed its name to IUCN in 1956 with its headquarters in Gland, Switzerland. Just world that values and conserves nature is the motto or the vision of IUCN. Just world that values and conserves nature. Its members include both states and non-governmental organizations. One of the earliest or the first such organization to deal with the conservation. International Whaling Commission, IWC. It is a global intergovernmental body which works towards the conservation of whales and the management of whaling. IWC's headquarters are located in Cambridge, UK, and India is a member. Here they can include Switzerland, but it is in Cambridge, UK. So this you have to remember, and India is a member. It was established under the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, signed in Washington, DC in 1946. The Commission introduced zero catch limits for commercial whaling in 1986. Japan recently pulled out of the International Whaling Commission. That you have to remember. Other global initiative, IPCC is the United Nations body. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is the UN body. You have to remember it for assessing the science related to climate change. It was established in 1988 by UNEP and WMO. You have to remember who had formed IPCC, WMO and UNEP. WMO and UNEP to provide policymakers with regular scientific assessments related to climate change. And they come up with various scientific reports about what will happen to the Earth due to climate change, and generates a regular warming, and people, researchers all over the world tries to contribute in this. Okay, sixth report they had talked about what if the warming happens more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Also, IPCC has established National Greenhouse Gas Inventories Program. National Greenhouse Gas Inventory Program. There is also Pittsburgh Climate Dialogue Series was launched in 2010 following the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference and has been hosted annually by Germany. Okay. C40 World Mayor Summit was held in Copenhagen. It is a network of world mega cities. Okay, Delhi, Chennai, Jaipur participated in it. Climate Vulnerability Forum is also one of the organization, and it is a partnership of the vulnerable countries which are in island in nature. If environmental degradation happens, then they would be impacted more. Then Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. It is an international coalition for countries, UN agency, multilateral development banks, private sector and academic institutions to promote research and knowledge sharing in the field of disaster resilience infrastructure. CDRI was launched by the Indian Prime Minister at the 2019 UN Climate Action Summit. That you have to remember. Climate Leadership of India, CDRI is very important, can be written in mains as well. South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, international organization established in 1982, headquartered at Colombo. Member countries are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. It also serves as Secretariat for the South Asian Seas Program, SASP. Then REDD, Reducing Emission from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, is the global endeavor to create an incentive for developing countries to protect, better manage and save their forest resources, thus contributing to the global fight against climate change. The three UN agencies, UNEP, UNDP and FAO, have collaborated in the establishment of UN REDD program, basically trying to create an incentive for conservation of forest. Then REDD Plus goes beyond merely checking deforestation and forest degradation and includes incentive for positive elements of conservation, sustainable management of forest and enhancement of forest carbon stocks. So if you are doing something in a positive direction, you will be incentivized. So incentivize the developing countries to keep their forests conserved by offering result-based payments for actions to reduce and remove forest carbon emissions. There is also one thing, globally important agriculture heritage system. This is important because it is GIEHS is formed by FAO. A remarkable land use ecosystem and landscape which are reaching globally significant biological diversity, evolving from the co-adoption of a community with its environment and its needs and aspiration for sustainable development. India has two GIEHS as recognized by FAO. Traditional agricultural system Koraput, Odisha. Below sea level farming system Kuttanad. Kuttanad mein the land is below sea level and it is very famous for rice cultivation, paddy cultivation, and traditional agricultural system Koraput, Odisha. Okay, you have to remember. Some pointers are given that New Zealand has formed a zero carbon law, that can be asked. European Union launched Green Deal. Okay. UNFCCC Secretariat launched its Momentum for Change Climate Neutral Law. This was asked as well in the previous year question. Tropical Forest Alliance was formed in Rio 20. UN General Assembly declared the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2031 to 2030. 1 trillion trees initiative is launched by World Economic Forum and led by UNEP and FAO. Okay, so these you have to remember. In the next revision series lecture, we will talk about the important environment acts. Every year, a question is being asked on convention, acts, and bodies. They are very important topics. Thank you very much. Take care. Best wishes.